Good evening again. Welcome to the June 12th, 2019 School Committee meeting. We've just returned from executive session, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And our first order of business, our very exciting order of business, is our recognition of retirees who are here with us. And Dr. Brand, I'll pass that over to you, and then you and I are going to hand out the plaques. All right.
Thank you very much, and good evening. It is with sadness, but also great appreciation for this time of the year and saying goodbye to members of the WPS staff. And so this evening, as I've come to learn, an annual tradition here in Wilmington to do just that and to acknowledge those that have served Wilmington for so very long in so many cases. The intention tonight is to acknowledge and recognize our retirees who are here in attendance tonight. Unfortunately, we also have some other folks here that I will share a little bit of information about who are unable to be here this evening, but still I think very important to acknowledge their service to Wilmington. So if we may, we'll start with those that are in attendance tonight, and then I'll shift gears and take a moment to acknowledge those again that are not able to be here. So. So first off, we will start with Miss Joan Feeney, Joan Feeney, serving at the West Intermediate School as a fourth grade teacher for 46 years for Wilmington. It is with our pleasure that we thank Joan for her service to Wilmington, to the hundreds, thousands of students that she has served. And we will certainly miss her as she moves on, but take this opportunity to thank her for her service here in Wilmington.
You want these out of the package?
Next, it's with pleasure to acknowledge Frank Ferrio, who is here with us this evening from the Woburn Street Elementary as the assistant principal. Frank has served here in Wilmington for 22 years. He began here first as a principal at the North Intermediate School and then moved on to assume the role of assistant principal at Woburn Street, where he has served since July 2013. And we also take this opportunity to thank Frank for his many years of service and his leadership to students and staff and our respective communities at both the North and the Woburn Street School. Thank you. Next up, Ms. Doria Gertie, who's also here with us this evening, administrative assistant at the high school year with 24 years of service to Wilmington. She began as an administrative assistant at the Wildwood Early Childhood Center and then joined the high school in July of 2014. 24 years of service. Thank you so much, Doria. Next up, Miss Eileen Lee, who has served many schools and thus many students, that many more throughout the district as a physical therapist with 11 years of service here in Wilmington, and we thank her for her service and dedication to our students and families. Thank you. Next, Miss Susan Mann has served as administrative assistant here in Wilmington with the middle school. With 14 years of service to Wilmington, she began as the administrative assistant to the assistant superintendent of curriculum and development here in the district, and then assumed the role of administrative assistant where she most recently ended her career at the middle school, and she assumed that role in February of 2011. Thank you, Ms. Mann, for your many years of service here in Wilmington. And lastly, this evening here in attendance, we acknowledge Ms. Marianne Oshiro, Wilmington Middle School Special Education Reading teacher. With 2 years of service, she began as a language-based program teacher at the middle school and then transferred to special education at the middle school in August of 2018. Thank you, Marianne, for your service here in Wilmington. And if I may, also to take a moment to acknowledge again those who are also retiring at the end of this school year, but who so kindly and graciously served Wilmington. First, Margaret Magee, Student Support Services Administrative Assistant with 20 years of service in Wilmington. She began as a part-time educational assistant at the Boutwell and then transferred to the role of full-time educational assistant, also at the Boutwell, in August of 2000. She has assumed a number of different positions throughout the district, including within special education, student services, where she concluded her role again as administrative assistant starting back in July of 2012. And so we thank Ms. Magee for her service. Mary Moran, Shawsheen Elementary School educational assistant with 19 years of service in Wilmington. She began as an educational assistant at the high school in the TAP program, and then made her way to Wildwood in 2002, where she was an educational assistant, and then also served time and families and students, of course, in the Boutwell and the Shawsheen Elementary, where she concluded her career August of 2018. Donna Ricker was also not, unfortunately, able to attend this evening, but Donna leaves behind 21 years of service here in Wilmington, where she served as the middle school, most recently as an educational assistant. She began also in the TAP program, as I understand it, at the high school, and also spent time serving our families and students at the Woburn Street, the North Intermediate, Middle School, and the high school. And so thanks to Ms. Ricker for her service. Mr. Jeff Strasnick, Woburn Street Elementary Principal, is retiring this year after 7 years of service in Wilmington, and he began as the principal for both the Wildwood Early Childhood Center and the Woburn Street School in July of 2012, and then transitioned just to his most recent and current role, where he'll conclude his career here in Wilmington as the Woburn Street principal. Sharon Tildesley, Boutwell Educational Assistant, is leaving Wilmington after 30 years of service. She began as a kindergarten aide at Shawsheen Elementary and then transferred to the Boutwell Early Childhood Center in August of 1995. And lastly, Ms. Marianne Valeri, Wildwood kindergarten teacher, is retiring after 13 years of service in Wilmington, where she began as a long-term substitute teacher at the Wildwood and then transitioned to kindergarten teacher at the Wildwood in July of 2007. I've learned an awful lot, I feel, over the course of this year. One of the things is most certainly the level of commitment and long-term service that we are so fortunate here to have with many staff here in Wilmington. And this one, sorry. My apologies. I'll circle back. Ms. Maureen Dolan, Wilmington High School English teacher, retiring after 17 years of service here. And I got them all, right? One more? Yep. Oh, Louis Nardo. Wilmington High School physical education health teacher, retiring after 17 years of service here in Wilmington. Again, thank you to these folks for their many, many years of service and their impact on literally thousands of families and students in Wilmington. We thank them for their service.
Thank you. On behalf of the school committee, thank you for your service and your dedication and your time of just supporting and loving and making our students who they are today. So we really do thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Does anyone want to say anything from the committee?
I think you've expressed my
I've
sentiments.
expressed it. Okay, I've said it all. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much.
We will move on to approval of items by consensus. Approval of minutes, May 22nd, 2019. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Seconded by Mr. Ragsdale. All in favor? It's unanimous. Sorry, Tristan, did I go too fast? We have approval of the 2019 CHNA 15 Collaborative Grant to the Wilmington Public Schools Vaping Committee in the amount of $13,000.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Burns, seconded by Mr. Fennelly. And all in favor? It's unanimous. Approval of the 2019 Wilmington Educational Foundation Technology Grants in the amount of $5,765.75. And do you want to make a motion? Well, we're going to read the names.
Sure.
Is that okay? Okay.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be able to read the names who are certainly going to benefit from the kindness of the Wilmington Education Foundation and their support for our programs. Miss Larissa Weeks, grade 1 teacher Shasheen, in the amount of $250. Michelle Levesque, grade 4 teacher, West Intermediate School, for $449. Kristen Smith, grade 7 ELA teacher at the middle school, for $149.99. 4 teachers collectively, Kim Provençal, Heather Peachy, Megan Jones, and Melanie Patterson, and collectively representing the district for a total of $495. Miss Lisa King, principal at Shawsheen Elementary School, for $886. Holly Glynn, speech language pathologist, $857.99. Karen Canteros and Alexander Perry, speech language pathologist at the Boutwell, for $1,000. Courtney McClendon, speech language pathologist, $876.87. And Suzanne Krull, speech language pathologist, for $802.
Excellent, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve? Mrs. Newhouse, seconded by Mr. Samaha. All in favor? That's unanimous, Tristan, thank you. Moving on to our warrants, we have G437, G438, R244, L86, L87, L88, L89, L90, and FS35. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Burns, was that a motion?
Yep.
Mrs. Burns, seconded by Ms. Newhouse. All in favor? That's unanimous. Payroll ending 6/5/19. Do I have a motion? Mr. Fennelly, thank you. Seconded by Mr. Bjork. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Warrant CB25 and CB26. Do I have a motion? Mr. Fennelly, thank you. Seconded by Mrs. Newhouse. All in favor? That's everyone. We have 2 abstentions. Thank you. Warrant SPED 49, SPED 50, SPED 51, and SPED 52. Do I have a motion? Mr. Samaha, seconded by Mr. Fennelly. All in favor? And that is 3 abstentions. Thank you. All right, moving on. We were going to recognize our student rep tonight, but she is not feeling well, but we would like to say a special thank you to Allison Jordan and to thank her for her reports and to wish her well and a wonderful summer. Okay, and that brings us to our superintendent's report.
Thank you very much again, and good evening to everyone. First off, this evening, there are a number of items under this part of the agenda, Superintendent's Report. But to begin with this evening, we'll take the opportunity to introduce to you and to members of the community a couple of our new leaders here in the district. As you know, it's been quite an active and busy winter and spring as it relates to searches in the district for some very key leadership positions. And I thought it would be an important opportunity to associate a name and a face for both our school committee and, of course, our wider Wilmington community. And so to start with this evening, we've invited 2 of our most recent leaders that have been appointed. One is out of state from Chicago, and that's the new middle school principal, so he is not here this evening. However, Mr. Ken Lord, our new Director of Technology and Digital Learning Mr. Lord officially joins the district effective July 1st. The fact of the matter is he has been active and working very hard already with members of the leadership team in the technology department to get up to speed and on board. We're so looking forward to having Mr. Lord join us, and I thought I would take this opportunity to introduce him to you. So welcome, Mr. Lord.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's great to be here. I'm really excited to work for the Wilmington Public Schools, to return my career to solely focus on technology management. Opportunity to work with Dr. Regan again. We worked in Bedford for a number of years together. So I'm really excited to be here. I've had a lot of opportunity to work with the staff already to start our summer planning on several of the projects we have and the benefit of town meeting articles, and we're ready to hit the ground running. Thank you.
Any comments from the committee?
Yeah, just welcome.
Great
To have you on board. Thanks for the important position. Thanks.
We've already seen some work you've been doing and filled out a survey, so we're hitting the ground running. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for coming here.
Tristan, has Ms. Sullivan arrived? Okay. Well, perhaps she's running late. Also invited this evening is Ms. Suzanne Sullivan, the principal-elect of the Woburn Street School, and so if she shows up in the next short while, I'll be sure to introduce you as well. Leadership search updates on a broader level, item 7B, just to take a moment here. First off, the Woburn Street School Assistant Principal, as members of the committee know, we have recently been engaged with Ms. Sullivan's efforts, who's been part of the process in the search for an assistant principal for Mr. Ferrio, who is obviously retiring at the end of this school year. The screening committee identified 4 finalists to move forward in the process. This is a process that's been very consistent with the other search processes that we've used over the course of the year. In this particular case, I took the opportunity to engage Ms. Sullivan, given her incoming role as the principal, to be involved in the process, and that process included visits to the school, Woburn Street, of course, that is, last week, meeting with staff, meeting with Ms. Sullivan and myself, as well as other folks throughout the days here, respectively. Based upon an evaluation of feedback that was gathered from staff during the visit, also trying to understand as best as we can collectively around the respective needs are of the school, it was determined that we, at this point in time, just didn't have the right candidate over the long term in that role. And so as a result of that, I made the decision to close that search out. It leaves us obviously in a somewhat challenging position, but one that certainly over the course of the next short period of time, I'll be working with Ms. Sullivan on to pursue what, at this juncture, as we look ahead to next year, will be the best level of support for students and staff as we think about a long-term solution for that. So that's an update with that, and more to come, of course. Coordinator of Special Education is a search that is, as you know, also ongoing. We had 2 finalists that emerged from a field of just over 25, I think it was 28 candidates. They actually met yesterday with members of the district leadership team, as well as we invited parents as well to attend, and we had a small gathering, but nevertheless, an important opportunity for them to meet those 2 candidates. I'll be working very closely with our Director of Student Support Services to finalize that decision in the coming days, and as that's made clear, I'll be sure to communicate that out. School Guidance Curriculum Team Leader, lastly, that is also a search that we recently concluded, and our interim candidate, Ms. Molly Dickerson, through a search process emerged as the permanent replacement for that role, and so she'll resume that role effective July 1st, but in a permanent capacity. Athletic sports program offerings, item 7C, just very briefly here. We do have our athletic director a little bit later this evening to present to you. As members of the committee know, over the course of the last short period of time, there's been some information forthcoming to you and certainly to me as it relates to gymnastics program, with interest, it seems, by some of the community to revisit that program as it relates to being a part of our athletic department offerings here in the district, and so certainly want to acknowledge that interest. As the members of the committee know, the respective budget for fiscal year 20 has certainly long passed us by in terms of the development of that. And as it relates to these types of programs, as you know, especially related to the athletic operations, that's something that would be, I think, very appropriate to consider as part of the budget building process. And so we'll, before you know it, soon be upon that point in time thinking about the fiscal year 21. Also, though, worthy to note, I think, and I've made mention of this before to the committee, I think what's very clear to me and very important is that we pursue developing a mechanism, perhaps a policy, or if not, a set of procedures for administration to work collaboratively with the committee to make determinations around which specific activities, sports that is, do get incorporated into the overall operations. As you know here, and as I've come to learn in Wilmington, certainly we have a structure whereby all of the associated costs, to the tune of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for athletics, are incorporated into the operating budget at the local level. And so to that end, I think that it requires certainly some careful scrutiny and ultimately your approval. And so that's a process that I intend to work closely with our athletic director on and be back to you in the fall to continue in that conversation. Open house dates, we will start to, I know that this has begun at the school level, but certainly at the district level, we'll start to push those out to families. I know we're just ending, and I'll speak about this in a moment today, at the end of school, but these dates have been solidified for families as respectively they start to look ahead for next year. I'll make sure to push these out with further communication to our families, but in case some folks are interested and eager, grab your pen or your iPad or whatever it might be. Wednesday, August the 28th, Boutwell Early Childhood Center will have their open house dates. Wilmington Middle School on September the 5th. The high school on September the 10th. The West Intermediate School, as well as Wildwood Early Childhood Center, will have their open houses scheduled on September the 12th. September the 19th, Shawsheen in the North. And finally, September 26th, Woburn Street School. Again, that will certainly be pushed out in a number of different venues over the course of the coming weeks and months. And finally, item E is entitled Proposed Vaping Policy Update. There is a memo that you'll note in your packet, and for members of the community who might be interested in this item. This is a follow-up to our discussion here at your most recent meeting with some additional points of clarity for consideration. First off, the recognition of the need for alignment with school committee policy that was discussed here as it relates to the proposal that's before you, that's incorporated into the high school handbook. And in the memo, I talk about that recognition in terms of the policy. The revision to consequences proposed in the memo, you'll note, is item number 2. And after further conversation with Ms. Peters, the proposal here, a slight modification, is to incorporate the words "up to" as it relates to the specific consequences that were listed with the various violations. You might recall that the original language had it fairly black and white, if you will, in terms of a specific set amount. And I think, well, that's understandable sometimes as a goal. That flexibility, depending on the circumstance, I know certainly is also very helpful as well, too. So that's a slight revision that I'm bringing for you for your consideration as it relates to that policy. And then finally, and perhaps arguably most importantly, item number 3, implementation and monitoring. Again, you know, the origin of this was as it relates to the high school handbook for your consideration. But on a much larger level, I think we would all agree, clearly there are lots of concerns as it relates to health and well-being of our students, specifically related to vaping. And so it's not lost upon me that what we're talking about here is seeking your approval of handbook language and down the road perhaps policy. But on a much larger level, the proposal and the recognition here that I think with my leadership team and those in key roles, we need to continually be monitoring this, tracking this in a much deeper sense than just seeking your approval and then coming back with any kind of revision in a handbook a year from now. This is clearly something that's on the minds of many. I know it's on the minds of many parents. I can tell you it's on the minds of many staff and students, as you heard from before. So that's a memo there. I'm happy to take any comments or questions or feedback if you'd like on that, or certainly you're welcome to hold until the handbook a little bit later tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions or comments from the board?
I think I prefer to discuss when it comes
When we
before
get
the
to the
board for approval.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. It does appear as though we have some students here who would like to briefly talk to the committee. I'm not sure if I'm going to take I might just keep public comments where it is, but I'll let the committee decide if they'd like to hear from some students who I believe are gymnasts. I'm just getting word of this now, so we're just trying to wrap our head around that. But if the committee would vote to or be okay with having the young ladies speak to us now as public comment, And then we can also have public comment at the end, because there's some hefty things on here, so I don't want to just move public comment, if that makes sense. So any thoughts, questions, comments?
Take a bit out of order.
Appropriate, that's fine? Are you okay? Okay. All right. I think it's your turn. If you want to come on down, we have a section here. No pressure, sorry.
We'd like to start.
But you're more than welcome to wait till public comment, but if you'd like to speak now, you're more than welcome to come on up. They did one of the-
Yeah.
You ladies like to come down
Yeah.
here, have a seat.
Okay.
Do you have it? Yeah, it's
Good evening.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Emerson. My name is Emerson Forsyth, and this past school year I was a freshman at the high school. In the fall, I did cheerleading, but I wasn't able to continue to the winter season because I chose to continue with my competitive club gymnastics. And then I ended up winning the state all-around title in my division. And then I've been doing gymnastics for my whole life, but I did quit 2 weeks ago because I wanted to become more involved with our school. And then I just thought it was like kids spend their whole life, like their whole childhoods playing sports to be able to be like really good at them at a high school level. And I just don't think it's fair to gymnasts because they don't get to excel at it at a high school level. And for the gymnasts who want to earn a college scholarship for it, high school gymnastics is the best way for them to get scouted and for other people to notice how good they are. And it's the only way they're going to learn how to work as a team like you'll need to do in college gymnastics. So thank you for your time. We hope that you will consider creating a gymnastics program here at WHS.
Okay.
Thank you. It is very brave. All right, we'll move into old business. So you want to take that one?
I will. Item 8A, this is the second reading, and again, seeking your approval of the Wilmington High School Student Parent Handbook for the 2019-20 school year. As you know, this was before you last meeting for your review. It's here in accordance with Mass General Law that requires school committees to approve high school handbooks, handbooks at the secondary level, the high school specifically, that is. You'll note that there was a slight change that Ms. Peters received feedback on to incorporate. That's incorporated and included rather in this packet, and that has to do with MCAS competency-related changes. It has emerged that we have to be cognizant of a date change, a year change that I think needs to be made there. But otherwise, that's the only change in the handbook that is before you this evening. And again, looking for your vote of approval for the handbook for the 2019-20 school year.
Questions, comments? Mrs. Burns?
So Dr. Brandon was kind enough to sit down with me for some time to talk about some of the concerns I had. I very much like the language of the vaping policy and have no reservations with it, although I do have a little caveat that had come up because I continued to do research after our discussion, and I'm fortunate that I have two siblings, both of which are driving this in their own districts. I have a slight concern that I'd like to bring for additional thought before the board with regards to the language as it pertains to number of students in a bathroom. I think, as they found in one of my sister's districts, that kids who don't vape aren't able to utilize those bathrooms because they're afraid to go in with other kids vaping, and or being caught up in a wrong place, wrong time scenario. So it hasn't mitigated their access to be using the facilities as we'd like for all of our students to be able to, and not have to be on lockdown with one bathroom open. The other aspect that I continue to struggle with is the disciplinary piece. And in doing my research since our discussion, I have seen that this is an amazing work that's coming out right now. Newburyport is piloting a piece through Stanford Medical School. They've reached out, and they in turn are collaborating with Beverly in creating their pieces of first, second, third violation with programming and what that programming looks like. I'm not against the suspension aspect as a measure. I think we have more impact if we keep these kids in school and educate them. That's what we do, and that's our business. I think there does have to be a serious consequence if they, a serious consequence, but I think, and maybe this can evolve, but I do think that we need to be more heavy on the diversionary program at the first offense, making that a 5-class, 5-week program up the first, and not at the back, because we want to deter. We want to stop them. We want them to consider stopping. We have different students. We have kids who vape socially but aren't addicted, and we have kids who vape who are addicted. And so I really think that education needs to be on the forefront, at the beginning, at the first violation, not at the end where these kids may have that time in that process to get addicted, if that makes sense. So I think I would like to see I want to give the administration certainly the levity to drive this, but I really do think education needs to be on the forefront when we look at consequences for our students and trying to deter them from doing so. And again, that would revamp the violation piece and rethinking, but I also had questions too. I don't know if this is appropriate, and please guide me if it's not. This policy is different than any of the other chemical policies we currently have in district. Unlike the tobacco and marijuana and other drug policies that we carry, this has to be monitored. So it entails follow-up after the consequence, check-ins with students. I guess something to think about, and I think this will come up in discussion as this evolves, is that I do have a question if a subcommittee will be formed, because I want to know that it's a lot of heavy staff involvement, and which is unlike the other aspects. Will a subcommittee be involved? Do we have staff who is willing to take part in these diversionary programs? And if so, discussions of stipends. I kind of want to, because there's a piece that kind of correlates with this policy. It's not enough to just monitor and set consequences. There's a piece about education, follow-up, and the time involved in doing so and curbing these, our students. So that's a budgetary piece that will come into play if we want this policy to succeed within our district and make the impact that I believe we're all trying to target. So I have those questions, not more inquisitive, not directive, but I kind of want to know, do we have staff already to take charge in formulating the curriculum, the class time, how that's going to evolve? Those are the kind of things I'm kind of curious about, because I want to make sure that besides creating policy, it's a working policy. And with this, it's a little caveat, because this is a policy that's going to be active, and the staff are going to have to be, or a certain group of staff members are going to have to sign on to see this through because of the diversionary program especially. I didn't know if curriculum was looked at. I didn't know if there was other resources or programming, or even a possibility of joining forces with other districts to kind of drive the second and third offenses. I know that Newburyport is reached out to Recovery High School, and I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with Recovery High Schools. There are high schools that have been created for kids with addiction. Their students wouldn't be going to these schools, but a lot of their leaders are working with the YMCA out of Beverly to create this resource program, so that although the kids are taken out of school as a suspension, they are mandatory to go to this resource program through the Boys and Girls Club, which I think is great. And again, I think there's a lot of research out there with regards to how do we engage kids in this conversation, in these consequences, in learning about the effects and the long-lasting effects of its behavior. I know this is deeply rooted in the social emotional piece, but I guess these are questions that I want to look at as we put forth this. I have no intention in not approving the language of the policy, but I would like to make a motion to amend and or add for discussion the approval of the policy. And I wrote something up, and it goes like this. I'd like to make a motion to approve the vaping policy with the exception of the language surrounding disciplinary actions, replacing said language with the following interim language. The administration has the full discretion in imposing penalties of in-school suspension, and diversion programming to any student determined to be in non-compliance of this policy. I don't know if that's too broad at this juncture, but I would like to bring forth that motion.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second? Is there discussion?
Yeah, I'm not ready to vote on something that I've heard verbally. I'd want to be able to see it and digest it.
Okay.
So I don't, on its face, disagree with what you're amending. I just would like to, I can't just hear it once and decide whether that's the language that I'd be happy with. So if your motion is to table, then maybe we could discuss that. Or approve as is, and
I
then.
have no problem tabling it, but it would table possibly. I mean, it's the board's decision, the approval of that policy tonight. So I would like to table it, food for thought, so that board members may be able to do their own research a little fuller, but it's at the discretion of the board. I think it's important enough to look at it carefully, but I don't want to delay the language of the policy of what it entails to,
Okay.
prevent it from.
Is there any more discussion on this? Mr. Ragsdale?
I would just say that I think very similar, that I think that the points you raise are really thoughtful and, give a lot of things to think about. But again, because it is a deep subject that requires thought, that I need to have, language in front of me to really read and think about and weigh in regard to the entire policy before voting to adopt something like that. So I'm in the same place as Mr. Bjork about that. I think the points that you made are very good points, but I can't make a decision about approving some new language, same day.
I wouldn't feel comfortable changing this without going back to the committee that originally developed this. So I wonder if we can have that in writing and then maybe send it on to you for the committee then to look at and see if they want to propose some revisions for our next meeting. Maybe we could look at it on the 26th.
My only concern there is, what do we risk if we're not approving this at this time? And if we approve it, can we amend it at a
Can we approve?
at a later meeting?
Can we approve the handbook without sort of approving this at this time
Or
until we're
can
ready?
can we even approve the vaping policy as it stands and amend it later as we see fit?
That's dangerous.
Well, I guess a couple of things. First off, if I may, just go back to the piece around education. A very fair point. In meeting with the committee, I know that they were, and I can't remember the name specifically, but there's probably more than one, I believe, a specific program that has that curriculum that is developed for, and districts are using. Ms. Murray might be able to remind me. I don't want to put her on the spot. She's here tonight. I'm sorry? It's EdVape. But in terms of embracing or incorporating a ready-made, if you will, program to help in the diversionary aspect and the educational component, I'm sorry, that's in place. I think just if I may, just as a larger point of reminder and reference, because this is clearly important. I think this dialogue is very healthy and critical. For members of the community who might just sort of be tuning into this, I think it is just worthy to note. This is here after quite a bit of great work and hard work by members of a wider committee to try and align, improve. There's a whole probably long list of adjectives that might be inserted for our efforts to intervene with students who are engaging in this type of activity. That it was clear to many that we are, as a district, and specifically at the secondary level, somewhat out of step with strides or steps that other districts and respective schools have taken to try and deal with this very significant issue. I think it's, so I think that that's point number one, that this is not just emerging as a piece of paper in a handbook to try and sort of push this through. Number two, there's clear intersections with your policies respectively as a school committee, and that's, I think, making this, and it's understandable, that sits there and that cannot be ignored. I tried to identify that and recognize that in my memo in the earlier part of the meeting. And number three, whether you decide to table this tonight and come back to it, to explore it over the summer, I suppose certainly more than theoretically, practically you could. I think what hangs in the balance is trying to, though, include specific language that will be incorporated into a handbook that serves as the cornerstone for guiding and dealing with student behavior, in this case at the high school level, starting the school year off. So that is to say, I think it's always difficult, always challenging to change rules and expectations and consequences on the fly after the school year has begun. Mm-hmm. Not impossible, but I think it becomes rather messy. So I just put it out there, and I suppose number four, to restate what I tried to do earlier, and I'm sorry if I didn't do a very good job of that. The recognition here that whatever is incorporated in the handbook around this has to be monitored, has to be measured, and certainly, respectively, whether it's through a working group or a committee or a subcommittee, I will admit, we haven't gone there yet in terms of thinking about that, but that is clear to me, so that when you're engaged in this conversation a year from now, or, you know, that there's more information that can help guide whether or not there are any revisions to whatever language is in here.
Mrs. Burns.
I couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Brand. I guess my motion wasn't to be the final, it was more to be a bookmarker for the offense piece, with hopes that there would be discussion around that. Again, as I said, it's not the language of the body of the policy that I'm contending is an issue. Although, like I said, I have concerns, but again, we can always go and amend that. It's the offenses that the motion that I made is no more than, in my mind, my intent was a bookmark so that administration has that flexibility to impose that. I do think that clearer expectations of what those offenses look like do need to be evolved, but I don't think the way it was presented, a part of this is something that I'm in agreement with, because I do think the education and more than an hour should be presented at the forefront to be the bigger deterrent in trying to keep these kids in school so that we have try to have the biggest impact. So that was the intent of my motion, is no more than just using it as an interim bookmark so that we can look at it and I think thoughtfully see what the best methods are. There are some research results out there pertaining to that. So that was the intent of the motion, not that it should be the final offense, because I really think that needs to be driven by the administration themselves. But.
Mr. Ragsdale?
I think this is going to one of Mr. Bjork's questions. Nothing prevents us from approving the policy as it stands tonight and revising it at any time that we want. So the legal requirement is that essentially every year you have to do it for the coming fall, but nothing prevents you from revising it more often and establishing new guidelines. So we can absolutely revisit and make changes to the policy as needed. It's not, we take one vote and now we're stuck for it for a year and can't do anything.
Other thoughts, comments?
I do. Are we moving on, just the vaping part or the other parts?
I think we can,
To
well, I think
this-
if you have other questions about the handbook,
The
I think
MCAS
that's fine.
stuff on this. One of the things that I noticed as I was reading this, it says, it talks about a competency portfolio for MCAS science, but it doesn't mention it for ELA and for math. And I thought, is that just an oversight? Because it should be in there for both. The other two subjects.
Yeah, I believe Ms. Peters said she got this language off of the site, but she could be, I'd have to go back and look and see if it was just omitted or if it was. so I can
So
do that. I don't know if
we'll have to clarify that.
Okay.
Follow up.
Mrs. Burns?
Oh, I'm sorry, are you referencing page 48?
I am I got the language, yeah, it's from 8A, it's the second page of 8A, the first thing. Updated language related to competency determination.
All right. Oh, okay, 'cause I'm just speculating that perhaps these are the changes that she made, that it may be in the original handbook. It may already be in the original handbook, and these may only contend with the addition, so that's, might be another.
Yeah, because I didn't look in the actual handbook.
Whenever I'm talking about competency portfolio, it's usually in my experience, it's been during the appeals process for students that have taken the test multiple times. That is one venue. But again, reading this, I'm just not sure exactly where that was pulled from, so I'd have to.
Okay. I mean, just because it's in there, it's clearly in there for science,
Right,
but
yeah,
not
I can
for
see why the
math
question
and
is
ELA.
raised.
Thank you. Okay, any other discussion? No. I just have one question. I think I asked it last time. I'm still unclear why the vaping disciplinary doesn't match the tobacco consequences. Do we have any clarification on that?
Because of the, again, Ms. Murray, I'll speak to, but because of the incorporation or the consideration of not just tobacco, but also drug, correct?
So potentially there could be drug paraphernalia containing not just nicotine, but drugs in it. So that was the query. I appreciate your comments. I felt like I couldn't hold back standing up here, and I just wanted to say I appreciate all those comments, and I can certainly bring any of that back to the committee as well. Part of the grant was for stipends for the diversionary program, so we want to be able to use that to get it up and running and start some of those education programs. Ultimately, we would love to open this up to everyone to educate them a little bit more about vaping, not just the offenders. So we did have a lot of conversations, and the students felt that that was very important as well. So that's just a couple of pieces on that.
Thank you.
And I think we're open to any changes. Again, if it was a pilot year for this, coming back to it and relooking at it, we would definitely be open to that to see how everything was going.
Great.
So we'll monitor it closely.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay. So I think maybe, there seems to be a couple of questions, so I might make a motion to bring this back to our next meeting.
We can do that.
Is that okay? I know it's the retreat, but I think we can probably still
We
cover.
certainly can do that.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd like to table this discussion until our next meeting.
Until
on
June
the-
26th?
Yes, please.
Because there's seems to be a couple of things that we need some clarification on. So I'll make that motion. Does anyone want to second it? Mr. Samaha, thank you. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Okay, thank you.
Moving on, homework policy update is item 8B. Also in your packet, there's a brief memo that Dr. Regan put together. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Regan in just a moment, but just to, again, for maybe members of the community that are tuning in and are curious about this, when both Dr. Regan and I began here in the district in July, we came to quickly learn about an effort that had been ongoing by a number of different folks as part of a committee to look to make changes to the homework policy. And yes, there is a homework policy, IKB, within school committee your school committee policy. Certainly, a number of districts have these in place. I would say not all districts, but a number of districts have a policy pertaining to homework in place. And what we came to learn very quickly is that there had been a number of different events, conversations, areas of interest that emerged at some point last year that gave rise to revisiting that policy with the hope to impact what that meant throughout our classrooms and throughout our district. At the beginning of last school year, the school committee then at the time took action to approve those respective changes. And so there you have it. It's a revision of policy, the course of action that does take place when school committee is looking to revise and update and change a policy. Simply stated, we began the year with those changes in place along with a myriad of other things as you well know, as Dr. Regan and I get settled here, it's very fair to say that this has been a point of continuous conversation with members of our leadership team, and the leadership team inclusive of central office, but also building principals. It's one that has taken different shape and forms over the course of the year, but quite frankly, is one that we just have not had sufficient time to really move to the next level, to really bring policy to life, to really expand throughout conversations with our teachers and our curricular leaders around what this policy really means. On the surface, there's slight changes. If you were to compare, I would suggest to you, the previous versus recent or revised policy. But at a deeper level, I think more than spirit, I think at the deeper level, what this really is trying to get at is impacting the work of classroom teachers as it relates to homework as a component or aspect of teaching and learning in the classrooms. So we have work to do. I know that. Certainly Dr. Regan knows that. This effort here, this memo is rather to briefly sort of point to the intentionality around where we're going with this work as we think about the year ahead. Dr. Regan?
So thank you. So as the memo states, we sort of divided our work into two phases, one being more about communicating responsibilities out to the different constituencies. So the new policy, just like the old policy, talks about responsibilities for students, responsibilities for parents, responsibilities for teachers, responsibilities for administrators. So between this spring, where we started the conversation with administrators, and early fall, we will work out this plan that's in the memo to push the policy out and to focus on that responsibilities piece. We realized after the school committee's approval in October, we didn't do a big public push of the new policy. And I think that that's important that we do that, to get that home in the hands of parents, communicate that via paper, using Blackboard. There's a variety of different ways, posting it online with a link so it brings you right to that policy, just ways to get it out in front of folks. In talking with teachers early on in the year, as they're sort of creating and crafting their classroom, I hate to use the word policy because it isn't, but their classroom practices around homework, to be sort of mindful of some of the language in the new policy. There's not a significant difference in the two, the old policy and the new, other than this fact that the new one really focuses on sort of philosophy more so than giving you number of minutes per grade level for homework. So in a way, that gives us, it makes it more challenging, but in another way, it also gives us more of an opportunity to engage in conversations with the professionals that are in front of kids every day about what homework means, why we should be giving it, what homework assignments should look like. And that really gets into the second portion of this rollout. There was, I think, a lot of research done. I wasn't on the committee, but a lot of research done, a lot of articles read and books looked at, and one of them was this Rethinking Homework by Vatterott, written in 2010. And in that book, the author outlines 5 sort of specific purposes around homework. And they're in your memo. It's purpose of assignment, efficiency of assignments, ownership of assignments, competence of assignments, and design of assignments. So what we thought we would do is create a variety of small professional development opportunities that we could use at the elementary level at building-based faculty meetings, at the secondary level in department meetings, around each of those 5 points, right, specifically, and we would roll them out methodically in the fall. And not just sort of presentations, but sort of putting out thought-provoking questions and ideas around these central themes, and having faculty members engage with the leaders in their building around these themes. Collecting that qualitative data and using that to sort of springboard discussions on how do we shape the district's philosophy around this policy. So that will be the plan to do in the fall and early winter. And the hope is that, again, this gives our professionals the chance to talk with each other about homework and the value of homework, and gather some very important data around sort of our teachers' attitudes about homework. And then there's, design from there some future professional development that we might be able to do at the building level, or whether it be building level, or we use a CIT day and do it by grade level and bring multiple buildings together. So that's the idea on how we would we would work this from this point forward. And I'd take any questions that you might have.
Questions, comments? Very quiet tonight. Mrs. Burns?
I'll just say, I think, I like the thoughtful approach. I know we're approaching 8, I get it.
I don't think it
But
matters.
I want to thank those that served on the homework committee to create this policy, as well as the thoughtful approach with regards to executing it, especially in the next fall, so that we can, our staff can look towards this when they do homework and develop their homework in their class lessons. And I just want to thank the committee once again, because it was a great deal of time, a great deal of research that went in to create this. So it's good to see that another way of executing it and trying to get it in the hands of parents as well as our teachers and administrators.
Thank you. Mr. Ragsdale?
I think that one part of this, this overall plan to roll this out in the district also needs to be, I don't know, part of a monitor or measurement plan. I think we need to also be thinking about, and this may be because we've been doing so much strategic planning lately, that I'm thinking about the measurable outcomes. How do we know if this new policy is rolling out successfully during the next school year? You know, what would we expect to see? What kind of assignments? What kind of thought processes from the teachers or the partnerships with home are we hoping to see if, if we make these changes that we're intending to make? And I think that being reflective and having those kind of concrete goals, what do we expect to be different about assignments? And then having a check-in later on in the year to say, well, how does it seem that we're doing, is an important factor.
Almost sounds like you're asking for the homework committee to reconvene to do some action planning. That's your proposing?
No formal proposal.
Let me see if Mr. Gallagher is available to come
I
back.
know, but it might be helpful. I mean, I do think there were some really strong leaders, and there are teachers from every building, so we've talked about just pulling together all the leadership from that committee to sort of help out in each of the buildings, but good points. Anything else from the committee?
Just a quick question, maybe, what is IKB? It says homework policy IKB. What
It's
is
the
that?
it's the
Policy.
That's the
policy
policy number?
Policy book.
Yes.
Drive me crazy.
What do you mean, you haven't read the policy book yet?
I have not.
It's not this big.
Well,
Not
you
fully,
can read the whole
fully.
thing, but not
Fully.
notice what the letters are, yeah.
I've gotten that far, yeah.
All right, is that good? Okay, so we'll move on to 8C, Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan Update.
Yes, I'll start, and then again, turn over to Dr. Regan. In your packet, there is both a memo, and I just want to pause on this and thank not just only Dr. Regan, but also our Ms. Brown-Legrand and Ms. Murray, who collectively, the three of them, have certainly done an awful lot of work around in a very important facet, certainly of our work here in the district, and the BPIB, Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan, is here. There's both a memo with this item, again, for members who might be interested in looking at this in the community in the packet, and then the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan that is updated respectively spring of 2019, of course, where we're at right now in time. So I do want to thank them for their work. This is an awful lot of work. This is associated with the work that was connected with the coordinated program review, but on a larger level, even in the absence of the coordinated program review, it's work that we would have needed to do anyway to update a plan that had a number of years had passed. So with that, Dr. Regan?
So when we presented this to you back in March, we explained that we needed to do a public comment period, which ran from March 20th to April 20th. We had 8 folks from the public make comments. It was an online public comment process that we used. In your memo that came with the updated plan, we have the summary of the comments that were received online. We did adjust or edit a few because a few of them included some derogatory and or inappropriate comments, so those were edited for the purpose of public distribution. And there were no comments on section 6 or 7. That's why you don't see those on the memo. But essentially, I won't go through each of these, but you'll see on the left that that's the comment made by a member of the public. And we did not ask them to identify themselves as parents or teachers. It was just simply public comment, and then the action on the other column on the right-hand side. So where we incorporated the changes, I noted that in the memo, and if it was something that I thought, or we thought, as Alice and Christine and I met, really is a good point that should be sort of, explained more thoroughly to the public, we will publish those questions along with a sort of common answer, so that we can help eliminate some misconceptions or misunderstandings. So we will publish both of those items together, the new plan and then this FAQ, if you will, is probably a better term for that, but we'll outline answers to some of those questions. So the plan is to do that after the committee looks at the book tonight.
Questions, comments? Mr. Samaha?
I was looking through the public comments, and one of them that really struck me on this is the third page of this, the last line where it says, the school should provide half-day workshops for students to understand what these values are. And I thought that's a pretty important piece of information, especially thinking about the new circle and the core values, and how much, direct instruction is there gonna be in, the values. So you're not just saying a word, but not having a full understanding of what is meant by that, at all levels. So it's just more of a comment, I think.
Yeah, and I think some of that is addressed in our buildings that have really embraced and are doing very well with PBIS when they do their all-school community meetings. That's a really great place. I just saw one at Woburn Street the other day. This is where they're reinforcing those items, and I think that's another reason why we really need to continue to commit to programs like PBIS. It does give us opportunities to do just what this person is asking us to do, take time out of the school day and focus on these values that we find important. So that's a point well taken.
Thank you.
Just a quick statement. I have to say I'm a bit disappointed that only 8 people in the public responded to their thoughts on this. I think it's one of several important plans that we have in the district that I think we always try to attain the best verbiage so that we can have the best outcomes. And the public really needs to understand that, we're limited with, our votes are based on what we know in perspective, and without that additional feedback, it's just not as helpful in improving and enhancing a plan that affects all of the students within our district. And I just wanted to comment about how important public feedback is, especially around plans of this nature, to contribute, and thank you.
I just want to point that when this was created, just to remind the public too, that there were parents as a part of the committee to update the plan in general too, just so that we remember that was part of the original process. So.
Thank you.
Mr. Samaha?
Can it be linked on the Wilmington Facebook community page? There's a lot of people commenting on everything under the sun under there. So if it was linked on that Facebook page, then maybe you'll get a few more comments.
But those will be the ones that are not appropriate.
Can I just ask, I may have missed this, how long had it been since this was updated previously? 2010, thank you. So it was due.
It was, yeah, because there had been legislation that changed, so we had to update for that reason. And
Thank you.
Mrs. Burns?
Thank you. Mr. Finley's question, how often will we be looking at this plan to just update and just check for nuances? Is there any kind of curriculum cycle, for lack of a better term? It's probably not the appropriate term, but.
So the plan is to use the Behavioral Health Task Force and do a 2-year
Perfect.
cycle.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Ragsdale?
To add one more thing about sort of the nature of public comment, that, public comment is usually a legal requirement when you're making certain types of changes, and there's a specific way that it has to be presented and publicized, and that you also receive it, that there's usually a specific, email address or a place where it's supposed to go. It's not meant to be the be-all and end-all of input that you get from the public. There's lots of other, ways that people can share their concerns or, their impressions. But having 8 official public comments is actually not the worst thing in the world in the world of official public comments. I think the state has put out a public comment on statewide regulations that have not gotten much more than that. But it's not the only way that input comes into the district. It's just the formal requirement of how you have to receive some input and respond to it.
Thank you. No, we're not voting on this, so we
No,
can move
that's
on.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your feedback, and again, thank you to Brian, Alice, and Christine for their work on this. We will, obviously, it goes without saying, ensure that this gets pushed out and made widely available to our staff and to our families as we begin next year. Still continuing under old business, item 8D is the second reading and approval of the strategic plan report. In your packet, there is a memo, that accompanies this. Again, just to recap, the strategic plan that culminated in an awful lot of work over the last number of months. As I mentioned last time, of course, it was here for your first review. It is my belief and my recommendation that as a school committee, you should very appropriately be approving the district strategic plan, and so ultimately that's why it's here. After a lot of the discussion last time during the presentation, the memo here attempts to propose for your consideration tonight some small adjustments or revision. Slight, I would suggest, but it seems to be important based upon some of the dialogue around the table. And so as you'll note in the memo, there are 2 proposals here for your consideration and I guess amendment, if you will, for the plan. First off, as it relates to objective number 3, the culture of inclusion. You'll recall that the original statement that came out of the strategic planning committee, that group of almost 60 people collectively representing all different stakeholders through the district, read as follows: promote an inclusive, collaborative school and community culture that embraces diversity to enhance learning for all students. And that really seemed to generate some thoughts and collective discussion around the table. And so what I provided here for you is a proposed revision to that language, with the hope that you'll see it to expand some of the thoughts that were generated on that evening. And it reads as follows. Again, objective 3, culture of inclusion, to promote an inclusive, collaborative school and community culture that embraces diversity, including race, socioeconomic status, ability, gender, sexual orientation, and the physical, emotional, and the learning needs of all students to provide an equitable educational experience. And then secondly, as noted in the memo down towards the bottom of the page, a suggestion that perhaps consideration by the committee be given to revising the order of the strategic initiatives under that section. And you can see them there as follows. I won't read them. So as it stands right now, these are the only 2 proposals for you, for your consideration. Again, the hope this evening is that we'll be able to have the school committee vote to approve the strategic plan. And with that, happy certainly to take any comments you have, either from me or the committee.
Questions, comments, Mr. Small?
I think this is great. I think this is a really nice update, especially considering our conversation about inclusion. One of the things that I would think that we might want to add to objective 3 is religion as one of those inclusive aspects. I know as a teacher, like I have, this past year I had a student who's Muslim and he was fasting for Ramadan, and that became a source of a lot of discussion amongst students and staff, and because it's not something that we typically have had. So I think it's, when we're talking about inclusion, I think that religion needs to be a part of that.
Thank you.
I just had one comment. I do like the changes that were being proposed for the inclusion. Just one thing that actually just popped out at me looking at the chart for the 4 different objectives, and there's professional development suggested underneath both 1 and 2, but there's nothing for inclusion, so to say. And I don't know if that will be specific to, part of the next planning process. But I just think it's important because it is spelled out in 1 and 2. And I do feel like our district is in need in many areas for professional development in the inclusion area, in all areas.
So, if I may, I absolutely, it's a great point taken. I certainly agree. And when I think about, for example, looking at the learning environment, really through that, and I would suggest to you very strongly that this is coming with the next wave of work around action planning, right? So how are we going to, as a district, seek to, looking at learning environment, foster an inclusive learning environment in the culture of respect? How are we going to get there and how are we going to achieve that? And I think that the way that we define that is through our respective action planning. That I couldn't, quite honestly, imagine having an absence of professional development to help support achieving that end in some way, shape, or form.
Okay.
Can I just add on to that? But I do agree that having it in 1.4 and then 2.1 and not having it anywhere in 3 does have a strange signal to me, so I wonder if we could add that, maybe as a potential revision. Sorry.
Absolutely, and if I could just suggest it, just for the minutes, to make sure that we capture it, if we could.
I mean, I don't think it's actually any different. I mean, I don't know if exactly it's 1.4, but Mrs. Newhouse, something along those lines, where you're having a multi-year plan.
Either, that, or even with 2.1, where you offer professional development that provides staff resources to strengthen their ability to meet, instead of social emotional needs, the, ability to foster an inclusive environment within their classrooms. Or within their buildings,
Yeah.
wherever,
Okay,
either way.
thank you.
I'm just asking for clarification to Mr. Samaha's comment as it pertains to religion. I need to make sure, only because I worry about, when you bring, faith is one's culture, which is fine, and I think there's a wonderful learning experience in the diversity of different faiths. But I do kind of cautious, and maybe I'm not understanding it right, so I'm just asking for clarification that old adage, you separate schools, state from religion aspect. So can you just, only because I don't think I'm understanding.
So I guess, so when I think of this idea of inclusion and diversity, right, we're talking about race, socioeconomic status, ability, gender. I think of people ostracizing certain students based on their religion, not accepting their religion. If you have, a student who is Muslim and during the month of Ramadan they're fasting, you have another student saying, "Oh, here, eat this, do this," trying to get the kid to, not really treating him as if he's a part of the group. So I would think of it just in terms of, another way that, a student could be excluded. Think about all the different ways you could exclude a student, and religion would be one way.
Well, but I think, I also think, though, the culture of inclusion as it pertains to here, my understanding is that the acceptance of all, whether it be race, faith, gender, bias, you know what I mean? So I think that is, it's under the umbrella of what inclusionary culture within our schools, classrooms, and community need, that I feel that this is targeting. I think, I know, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I do think there has to be some cautionary approach with regards to that. It falls into that realm of all those aspects that of students who can be excluded for whatever their reason is, and I certainly agree with you on that note, but I also, I just want to say that my concern would be making it the focus on faith, you know what I mean? Like, as opposed to just the diversity of our student body. I'd love, do you know what I mean? Singling it out as opposed to including it into the other, forgive me if I'm a loss of the appropriate words, but I guess for lack of a better, what I'm thinking of is classification of the diversity, whether it be disabilities, whether it be, again, race, whether it be faith, whether it be socially economic, whether it be, popular or unpopular, those aspects. I wouldn't want to have that weigh any more than the others, per se, with regards to inclusion for all and acceptance of all. And that's where I don't know if I'm understanding your
Well, I was-
approach.
There, I mean, in the proposed revision to objective 3, it specifies race, socioeconomic status, ability, gender, sexual orientation. And I just wanted
Oh,
to
okay.
add in religion to that because they are, it is specifying certain things.
But then,
So I felt that religion would be
Right.
something that we would want to include in, if we're specifying.
well, and then, but, well, then you would have to focus on those with disabilities too, right?
Well, that would be ability.
Ability.
I'm sorry, I'm looking, can someone just point out which?
Sure, so it's on the very top page, the proposed revision
Oh, okay, oh, forgive me, I'm looking.
to objective
Where-
3.
where it lists,
Oh,
ability.
okay, oh, I'm sorry, oh, okay, I see, forgive me. All right,
So
so I was
it's not
happy
saying
with the
teach it, it's just
diversity
saying
of.
embrace it. And
Yep, yep.
So teachers and
Yeah,
building
I'm not
administrators.
against it, I thank you, I appreciate the clarification, I knew I was missing a puzzle piece.
Mr. Ragsdale?
I mean, to some extent, this is always a little bit of the tangle that you get into when you start trying to enumerate the things that you want to teach, because you can never come up with the fully exhaustive list. And so, it's, at what point do you say, well, we're going to say this, we're going to leave this out, but the idea should be included that it's not an exhaustive list.
You're right.
So there's always going to be debates about exactly, what we're going to write down and what we're going to just leave to the general, culture and the sort of the spirit of the law. But I think that in this particular case, that I do agree with Mr. Samaha that both for just historical and completely practical reasons, that religion is, I think, something that does belong mentioned explicit here in this list, in this policy.
I have one more just kind of general comment, and I had sent my comment to Dr. Brand prior to the last meeting, and it's around the core values, the district core value that were being shown here, the circle. I think that is great. And one thing that I've seen as a parent on, say, like the PBIS team, is that every building has then adapted their own core values. And I think the district core values get lost because each building now has their own. And I mean, I know as a parent, I could probably tell you what the building core values are, but not necessarily what the past district core values have been. So it might be something to consider to use these district core values and make it so every building, all the way through, everyone's using the same core value. I know they would hopefully look different in every building, and the way that they implement them and show them, it's gonna look different, say at the Wildwood versus the high school. But I just think if this is something that we want everybody to know, everyone to speak the same language, it might be helpful that these core values are the same everywhere.
Thank you. Agreed. That's my other, I just had two things. I think it did come up, gender identification is not included, and is that under the umbrella of gender, was something that
That's one that would probably
fall under, okay. And then just the ordering of the initiatives below, so learning environment, building relationships, building partnerships, and home partnerships. I still feel a little concerned about having home partnerships as the very last one, as opposed to the building partnerships as it's described here. Expand our network of community partnerships. It seems as though collaborating and building home partnerships would be sort of, if we're actually ordering it in a way of it that we're classifying as importance. I don't know if that's exactly what we're doing, but I just don't know if I want to stick it there at the very end, and it seems sort of like an afterthought. So I would just recommend maybe switching 3, 4, and 3, 3. Just a thought. head nods, but.
No.
But with those minor changes, should we vote?
That would be great. Just to clarify, if I may, so religion, I think that's very clear in the culture of inclusion language. The reordering of 3.3 and 3.4, if I may just go back to the professional development, I'm not sure, just to make sure we're crystal clear, and for Tristan for our notes, or for our minutes, I'm sorry. The suggestion again around professional development, what would,
Well, so I think we were sort of in between two. So 2.1 says, offer professional development that provides staff resources to strengthen their ability to meet the, and so we were going to fill in with, or to provide, I don't know how you want to word that, or create a multi-year plan for meaningful and focused PD that supports the district's strategic objectives. Seems a little bit more broad, that we could probably actually copy that and stick it there, but do you have, Mrs. Newhouse, a thought on that?
Just somehow to support staff in buildings with being able to foster an inclusive environment that isn't necessarily, and it's not that I don't think people are purposely not being inclusive, it's just many times an oversight, though many times not as well.
I wonder if it's with culture of inclusion, it wouldn't just be the staff, it would be everybody. So
Yeah.
staff and students
Yeah.
and families. So it's sort of like an all-around PD. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Maybe.
as part of the learning environment, or as an additional?
Well, with inclusion, would we want to include it, so, because I do think it's important that families need to be brought in there as well, probably.
So I think that we would like a standalone professional development box, but we're flexible on the wording of it. So we trust all of you to wordsmith.
And they don't seem very confident.
Is that fair? Do you agree? Yeah.
So are you suggesting that there's a 3.5 that's professional development?
Yes.
Or maybe it should be 3.2. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, yeah,
It's
whatever
3.5.
number.
3.5 is-
Let's make one comment. If we do that, since this might involve home and family, can it be professional development / education? And then throw in, if it's written similar to 1.4, which encompasses everything, after professional development, maybe put / education that supports the district. That way, it's not just, because some things may not be professional development per se, but it's education.
That sounds good. Yep.
So.
All clear?
See, Mr. Ruggiero, no, 3.5. See, all right.
So we're proposing like a new separate professional development strategic initiative?
Under inclusion.
Under inclusion, so we're adding a
3.5.
3.5.
Mhm.
Professional development and education that supports the district.
Poor audience, I'm
Or
sorry.
something else.
So could we just adopt the language of 1.4? And therefore have something, create a multi-year plan for meaningful and focused professional development and education that supports the district's objectives around inclusion, something like that.
And then Mr. Ruggiero just suggested that we add education after PD, so professional development / education.
Okay, didn't I thought I.
Oh, did you say that? I'm sorry. Sorry. Yes,
But that-
perfect. That sounds great. Good?
Ms. Dixie, good? All right, thank you, Tristan. All right.
So
She
we're
had it like
we're
20 minutes
enhancing
ago. She's like, I already
1.4,
had
not
it.
creating 3.5, yes?
I think we are creating.
Yes.
No, I thought we were.
Leaving 1.4 alone.
Yes, 3.5.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, I thought that's what you,
All right.
just,
I was thinking, I was adapting the language of 1.4.
Taking that
just to-
language, but
Oh.
moving it over.
oh,
Okay.
okay, got it, okay.
So
Okay, so with that,
you could,
Should we-
seek action, or seek
a motion to approve the WPS strategic plan proposed revisions. Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Fennelly, a second? Mrs. Burns, all in favor? Yay. That's
Thank you.
unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Excellent work on that.
Work begin. Finally, moving on to, finally, under this section. Superintendent's goals. Do you really want to hear about these?
I think this is all good.
For the record, in your packet, there is the commitment that I had for reporting out, and very quickly on this, on the end of year report of my goals. Of course, earlier, not that long ago, I provided you with a more comprehensive update of the work to date. And this is really just an effort to try and finalize that, put a punctuation mark, if you will, on some of the things that were still left hanging. So in here, very briefly, is a memo and a restatement of the respective goals that you as a school committee approved for me earlier this year. My performance goals, as you'll recall, there were 3. The completion of superintendent's entry plan, which was goal number 1. Goal number 2 was the coordinated program review. And of course, as you know, truth be told, while this is here, this is really a goal that encompasses the work and efforts of many additional folks. And goal 3, similarly, the strategic plan. But I'm pleased to be able to say that, as you'll see the status, from my vantage point, I think that I would suggest to you that I've completed the respective steps under each of the goals that I set out at the beginning of the year. Again, thanks to the efforts and contributions of many, but thank you for your support for these, and happy to take any comments or questions if you have, but I'm meant to be brief this evening.
Mr. Wagner?
My only question is that the last piece under goal 2, the special education program review, noted is completed this month. And I wanted to ask what the plan is for reflecting on that and presenting the information when the results of that review will be presented to us.
So thank you. So it is very appropriate to say that it's been completed. The status of it is that it's in draft form right now. That the district, in fact, I knew that this was coming, so I wasn't foreshadowing something that I was hopeful to come, but it did come. We have the report in hand. There's an opportunity now for us as a district to review that plan. This is the Walker, it'll probably become, I'm going to guess, the Walker report, as would refer to, but is with full intention that once that report's finalized, it will be brought before this committee, and certainly to be shared, obviously, more widely with our staff and the community at large. So we're going into summer recess, obviously, now. We won't be ready to share that, nor would I suggest that it'd be most appropriate to share it at your next meeting, given that that's a retreat and something a little bit different. But I can absolutely assure you that it will be a presentation here in the fall once we return. Okay.
Other questions, comments?
I'd just like to commend Dr. Brand on completing these goals. I think it's been a really great transition. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
I would second those comments.
We all agree. Okay, so that brings us to new business. We're in new business now, so we're going to go to our vote on educational assistance contract. Would someone like to read the recommended motion? Mrs. Newhouse?
I move to approve the negotiation agreement between the Wilmington School Committee and the Wilmington Public Schools Education Assistance dated July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2022.
Do I have a second? Mrs. Burns? All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Under new business, 9B, we have the spring athletics wrap-up. Our athletic director, Tim Alberts, is.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
Well, it's hard to believe the spring season's over, but before I start, just wanted to thank the DPW Wilmington. They did an amazing job getting all the fields ready throughout town, really working their best to make sure the games are played and getting a nice start to the school season. Just compared to other towns and nearby cities, you know, we got most of our games in, where some schools and towns had to reschedule, and it's a big due to the work of the DPW. So I just want to thank them for that. Our spring sports update, baseball team coached by Aldo Kyra. Team made the state tournament once again and lost to Drake in the first round. Middlesex League All-Stars Bailey Smith, Tristan Champa, Gavin Kelsey, and Bailey Smith Jr. was named one of the 9 best players in the Middlesex League for both the Freedom and the Liberty Division. So he was named All-Conference. And we hosted the Memorial Day tournament, the Dick Scanlon tournament over Memorial Day, which is a big success. Softball, coached by Audrey Cabral-Pini. Overall record 14-6. Girls made the state tournament once again. Lost to Essex Tech in the playoffs. We had 4 Middlesex League All-Stars with Allie Moran, Jenna Sweeney, Kayla Burrell, and Ashley Crawford. And Allie Moran was named one of the 9 best players for softball, so she was all conference as well. Lacrosse programs had brand new coaches this year. Coach Zach McDaniel was the JV coach last year. He finished his first season as varsity coach this year. And Ben Wright was Middlesex League All-Star. And Coach Bill Manchester, WHS faculty member, coached the girls lacrosse team this year, and Cassidy Collins was an all-star. Both lacrosse programs did a great job with community service, working with Wilmington Youth Lacrosse, using younger athletes as ball boys and ball girls at games. Also invited them to practices just to see what playing at Wilmington High School is like. So hats off to the 2 programs for that. Girls tennis, coached by Matt Hackett, WHS faculty member, had an unbelievable record, made it to the state tournament and lost a heartbreaker to Newburyport, 3-2. And Newburyport has kept advancing and is actually playing in the North Finals tonight. So the Wildcats were really close. And if it just went one way or the other, we could have been playing tonight as well. League All-Stars for Wilmington Girls Tennis, Emily Hill, Carolyn Rooney, and Leah Krakutis. Spring track on the boys division, coached by Mike Kinney. Mike's a WHS faculty member as well. We had All-Stars Giandre Abel, Greg Adamek, Tyler Thomas, Colin Rooney, Sam Jurgens, Anka Nagoye, and the relay team of Giandre Abel, Richard Stewart, Matt Chisholm, and Mike Fothergill. And another relay 4x400 of Ada McGrath, Brian Eldard, Kevin Eldard, and Sean Riley and Jake Danilli. And spring track coached by Brian Schell, WHS grad. Brian's one of 2 coaches who coaches all 3 seasons, which is amazing. He's here practically all the time. I saw him running tonight, even though we didn't, season's long over, but he puts his heart and soul into it. All-stars on the girls' side team were Amy Russell, Hannah Levita, Amber Flynn, Sarah Levita, Amanda Broussard, and Evelyn Miller-Nuzzo. And last but certainly not least, boys tennis, coached by Rob Maley, made the state tournament this year. All-stars were Anna Gandhi and Chris Spinazzola. Most importantly, boys tennis won the MIA Sportsmanship Award for all of boys tennis, which is a huge accomplishment. So congrats to the whole team. And coach and captains will be honored on Monday at 3:30 at Lexington High School when they'll receive their Sportsmanship Award. That concludes spring update. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
So that brings us to our Cpac presentation. Is there a PowerPoint? Hello. How are you? Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having us. I'm Lisa Costantiello. I'm the co-chair of the Cpac. This is Melissa McDonald and Christine McNally. So we wanted to start off with if I remember to press start. What is the Cpac? So the Cpac is a formally organized group of individuals committed to the best possible services for children with special needs. Massachusetts special education regulations state that each school committee shall establish a Cpac on special education. Oftentimes, they're confused with the PAC, so we thought it was important to include what it is we do and what it is. So what we do is we advise the school district on special education programs, training needs, and policies. We promote a network of parents and a forum to share information. We promote communication between Cpac members, organizations, councils, and groups. We promote understanding, acceptance, and inclusion within the school and community. We provide informational forums for parents, students, educators, and professionals, and we support all families on IEPs and 504 plans. We are a subcommittee of the school committee, and we're also members of the MassPAC. So, our Wilmington Cpac mission, which we updated a little bit this year, at the start of the school year. The Wilmington Special Education Parent Advisory Council provides education and support to parents, school personnel, and the broader community on special education issues and services. The Wilmington Cpac's mission promotes a supportive, innovative, and respectful educational environment that ensures 603 CMR 28 laws are being met and in which children with special education needs have equal and appropriate access to opportunities and are encouraged to reach their full potential. And then, I already introduced us, but I'm Lisa, and I'm the chair, and Kate O'Malley did work with us this year, but unfortunately she had to resign, so she won't be with us this year. And Melissa's our technology liaison and secretary, and Christine is also our secretary. And we're always on the lookout for new members, so if you know anyone or anyone watching wants to come help us, we'd love to have you. All right. Now Melissa's gonna.
So for people who maybe don't know, special education exists or is, in place for children who require specially designed instruction. So perhaps they learn differently, they need additional support and services in order to be able to access the regular or general education curriculum, those grade level standards. And so what happens is that a student might be identified as possibly having a disability or requiring additional support in order to make adequate progress in regards to their same age peers. And the process is identified, the student is identified as needing support, the team comes together, determines that the child would benefit from an educational plan or perhaps a 504 plan, and the team generates ideas and accommodations to help that student to continue to make progress. It doesn't necessarily mean that there are intellectual differences. It doesn't necessarily mean that the child has physical differences. Gifted children can definitely fall under that umbrella. What it does mean is that that child needs unique instruction in order to be able to access the curriculum that's being presented to all of the students. So it's a way to promote equity in our classrooms. Our business meetings for the 2019-2020 school year are scheduled to be held on the third Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. So these are the dates that we are outlining, obviously subject to change as needed, but as of now, this is our schedule. Our past workshops this school year, we presented by the Federation for Children with Special Needs a workshop called An IEP for My Child, which is to help parents and guardians to be able to navigate, what an IEP document is, how to read it, how to interpret it. The Basic Rights Workshop was presented in partnership with the Tewksbury Cpac, and so we kind of came together to reach a broader audience, and we provided a workshop that would help parents to better understand what their rights are as parents of children who have unique learning needs. There was the Student Support Services helped us to provide a panel of experts. And so they actually provided different experts in different areas that may be of interest to our parents. And we participated in, providing some support to the anxiety series that was presented by the McLean Hospital.
Just to jump back to the beginning, I'm sorry. We actually partnered with Tewksbury for both the Federation workshops. So we hosted one and Tewksbury hosted the other. That way we could try to reach a broader range. Yeah, sorry.
And our upcoming workshops, so the things that we definitely have planned for this year is that basic rights workshop and the IEP for My Child workshop. Those are workshops that we are obligated to present. And then some other ideas that we have for this year would be to present a workshop on how technology can benefit students. Some students just maybe need an assistive technology. Perhaps a Chromebook is going to help them to access the general curriculum. And so, how can parents utilize technology to support their learners? Anxiety, but maybe with a focus on the middle school level, supporting that social emotional learning, that social emotional piece, bringing in a speaker, Lynn Lyons, who's been very well received in the past, and transition. So how do you support a child who is in that process of transitioning from their public school setting and moving on?
Okay, so I'm Christine Nally, and I'm going to speak a little bit more about the Cpac committee. So we do actually have seats on various committees in the district, which we always love to be asked and like to be included. And some of them that we were on this year were Special Olympics, Behavioral Workforce, Strategic Planning, and Wellness. And it's always important to have a member of Cpac on these committees because we're always thinking of inclusion. We're always thinking of truly all children and how they can access the curriculum, and also clubs and sports and anything that everybody has access to. So one thing that we've tried to do over the past couple of years is to offer some support for families. And we've tried to do a couple different ways. We had some coffees that we tried to do at Panera, one in the morning, one in the evening. We tried to do it a couple times a month. Depends on the year, they're hit or miss. Some years we have great turnouts, some years we don't. This past year we did not have a great turnout with Panera, so halfway through the year we did end that, and we just really fielded many phone calls one-on-one. We did meet with some families individually to review IEPs, maybe to see next steps, try to give them some support. It's very difficult for a parent when they're told that their child has special needs and they're handed a pamphlet on their rights and safeguards and are then told that this is their IEP and this is what's going to be followed. It's very overwhelming, and we really do try to reach out and try to answer questions and try to guide them through this process. And we do have an email listed there. It's a little bit cut off. But it is something that's on our website that we can get to in a little bit. Okay, where to find us, as I was just saying. So we do have, Cpac is on Facebook, and we welcome everybody and anybody to join our page. It's Wilmington, Mass. Cpac, and we try to put our workshops up there. We also try to put up sometimes little funny cartoons to kind of lighten everything that parents are dealing with, the kids are dealing with. Join our page and see. We're always looking for ways to push out our workshops so that parents know that there are supports in place. A lot of times the email just doesn't do enough, so this is a nice alternative. And also, I'd like to describe where our Cpac page is on the website. It's not the easiest to find. It is under important links, and then you can select Cpac. And there's lots of resources. There's lots of resources that Director of Support Services puts out, that Director of Social Emotional puts out. There are a lot of resources on our web pages. I just think families aren't quite sure where to find them, or they don't know that they're there, period.
And to jump in, like Christine said, it's a really overwhelming thing, when you find out that your child requires an IEP or a 504 plan, and you're getting all of this testing information, you're creating this document, you want to make sure you're doing the right thing. And I think that in that onslaught of information, parents maybe don't realize that we're here and that there is a group that's available to provide that additional support, like to listen and answer questions.
Okay, so membership and recruitment, as we just said. So we're always actively looking for parents and guardians. It's not a big commitment. As I said, we meet once a month, and we do try to get different ideas. Right now, this is our board. It's 3 people. We did have 4. And if you look at the number of students within our district that are on ed plans or 504s, you would think that we would have more than 3 people that sit on this board. So always reaching out. We're going to push out our meeting dates. We
really would love to see new faces. Doesn't mean we're going to drag you on the board. You can just come to a meeting, learn what we're more about. We would love to learn more about what's in every school. We all are in different schools right now. We could really use a middle school representative, which I do have one mother that I think might be interested in that. Because it's hard for us to know everything that's going on in the district when you're only a board of 3 people. Also, I can't read what's behind Steve's head. Oh, it's the email. So once again, this is our email, cpac@wpsk12.com. And at any time, if there's questions, concerns, even if staff can think of something that they think would be helpful for parents to learn, or if your committee thinks is topics that you think would be beneficial, please feel free, email us. We'll get back to you, maybe not in 24 hours, but we will get back to you in a couple of days when we have a chance to review them. Okay, so what we're looking forward to in 2019-20, we're very excited that we will have a new coordinator of special education. So I did have the opportunity to meet the 2 finalists yesterday afternoon. I'm very excited for a decision to be made and us to move forward to build relationships with that person. Also to continue to work with the Director of Student Support Services and to resolve collaboratively with the district. We work as a team and we try to work with the district, identify maybe some areas of weakness, some things that do work well, and really a lot of it is just to educate parents on the whole process. And just lastly, would like to note that there is going to be a Cpac on the Hill coming up in June. I think the date's the 27th. So that's something that's fairly new, that various towns have been going to the State House and lobbying for special education, and that is something that Wilmington will be participating in.
And if anybody here would like to join us, the invitation is open. We're working with Tewksbury again. So it's Tewksbury and Wilmington, Cpac on the Hill. So I can send out the invitation to anyone that would be interested in joining us.
That's it. Thank you. Any questions that anyone may have in regards to our committee, what we do, what we plan to do for next year?
Thank you. It's very informative. I'm familiar with you guys, but I wasn't aware that you were involved in so much, so that's great. But you mentioned a couple of times looking for new members, always willing to help, and you listed your meeting dates and times, but not your location. Do you meet in the same place every
Yes,
time,
we do.
or?
Yep. The Wilmington High School Library.
Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out. I think we do have that on the website.
Yeah.
Thank you
And
for
to be
pointing
clear,
that out.
I was aware, but I wanted to make sure that the larger audience that might be interested knew, so thank you.
Other questions, comments? Yes.
I just wanted to say, because I was the past co-chair of the Cpac until I got voted on to the school committee. And when I was on the board, we were a little bit larger group, and it was still a lot of work. So I commend the 3 of you. I know there was 4 of you this year, but it's definitely a lot of work. And for anyone who is thinking about, helping out even any little bit, or just attending the meetings, help giving different perspectives, it's definitely worthwhile. I got a lot of information as a parent from there, working with the district and how things needed to happen. So I really encourage parents to reach out to the 3 of them and join, because it is a lot of work. And, with just the 3 of them, they're going to be limited to what they can do. So I really encourage parents to really consider reaching out to them and joining. And then just lastly, if you can send me information on the 27th, I would be interested.
I just have a quick question. So there's a school committee member who attends your meetings, which is Mr. Ragsdale. Is that right? And then does, I know this, but there's also the Director of Special Education. So Alice Brown-LeGrand also attends all of those meetings. And so it becomes sort of an opportunity for all of you to talk. And so the idea would be that the board is sort of the one having the meeting, and people can be there.
Yeah.
Sort of, kind of like this.
It's run exactly like this.
Like this, right? So it's not as though everyone's participating, so you're having a meeting, people are there to take in and listen, and there's an opportunity for public comment as well? Yeah. So just to give people a sense, I've attended, so I kind of have an idea of what it looks like, but it might be people to think like, oh, I could go and I can watch and I can see what happens there, and also this idea that you're looking for more people to serve on the board, but.
Right, and we were trying to come up with other ideas for trying to reach people. You know, we were thinking of podcast or using WCTV or trying to, you know, get people to come in and provide childcare. So we are trying to kind of think of different ways that maybe more people will be interested in attending, but.
And we thank you. We
And if
thank
there's
you very
anyone
much.
watching or anyone has any suggestions on that
Send it your
reasons that
way.
we could do to help get them to meetings,
Yeah.
like we're willing to help and try to accommodate in any way we can to get more people and help more people.
Yes. I know we bring our kids to the meetings
Yeah, we have
sometimes.
brought our kids.
So.
I have to say, I too actually went veteran before I got voted in onto the board, and I do commend you, because I was part of the initial group that kind of revitalized the Cpac, because it was kind of dwindling with one woman who all they did was do the mandatory workshops, and that was it, and and seeing Mrs. Newhouse's role over the past couple of years, and how she picked up where the group that I was a part of left off. I mean, and I just want to give you accolades there. No, but it is, because I think it is a very important, it's unfortunate, because you serve such a very important purpose within the district, that a lot of parents, such as ourselves, forget about, because they're caught up in their daily lives with their children and their needs and the rigid schedules some of our families have to go. And I think that's always been the crux. Now that you have a recruiter on top of it being secretary, I'm hoping for more positive results, though. But I do have to say, absolutely, however we can support you in your role to get the word out on workshops, education for parents, and just trying to find that path, because I highly, I've seen the need that numbers, there's so much more discussion and brainstorming that can go on to better our district and for our kids through this committee, and I very much respect the time that you're investing in it, because it is a lot of time. It certainly is, and so I thank you all very much for doing so.
Thank you.
Mr. Ragsdale?
And I'll just, I could go on, but I won't. And I have had the opportunity to attend, I think, every Cpac meeting this year, except I think one. And it's just such a terrific group of people who are just devoted to, to this town and to the children of the town. And you're just a terrific resource, both to our community and to this committee and to me as my official role was kind of to bring the school committee news to you of what's going on in special education, but you were such a tremendous resource to me as someone trying to learn more about special education in our district all this year, and so thank you very much.
Thank you for coming
All
and
your time.
sharing us, your time, sharing with us all.
And Cpac
what
meetings are
guys do
fun, you
here.
should all come.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
Cpac meetings are fun and cool and informative, and it's the place to be on Thursday nights next year.
Friends isn't on it, the Thursdays at 7, anyway.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you introduce this one? Yeah, go ahead, because I don't know who's doing it. Is it
No,
Doreen?
that's fine, and company.
Okay.
We'll move on to item number 9D, the Model Comprehensive School Health Service Program Grant. There is a fairly extensive document in your packet that includes information about the grant that was submitted by Ms. Crow. She is here this evening, and I'll ask her to come forward. I think she has some folks that are going to be presenting along with her. So the intention tonight, this is not seeking your vote of approval or any action specifically, but really to provide a broad and brief overview of the School Health Services Program Grant for the district.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. And good evening to everybody. So I'm going to start by introducing our grant writing team. 4 members are here tonight, 2 members were not able to be here. Brian Regan, our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Staff Development. Christine Murray, Coordinator of Behavioral Health and Social Emotional Learning. Laura Stinson, Health and PE Liaison. Tim Alberts, Director of Athletics and Physical Education. Sue McDonald could not be here tonight. She's our English as Second Language teacher. And Janice Bacon, our middle school nurse. This is the 3rd School Health Grant Award that Wilmington has received. I'm very proud to say. The very first grant that we received was back in 1999. That was awarded until 2006, and it was called the Enhanced School Health Services Grant. It has some of the same components that we're going to be talking about with this current grant that will be starting next year. The focus was on infrastructure, capital equipment, program support, information management, data collection, and continuous quality improvement projects. Then in 2007 until present, this current year, we received the Essential School Health Services Grant. It contains some of the same components as the original grant, but then they expanded the program to include a regional nurse consultant component and a partner school component. And so we've been mentoring Burlington Public Schools nurse leader and the Woburn Public Schools nurse leader. And it's been a great partnership that we've built and learned a lot from each other. So we're pleased to announce that we've been awarded the new Comprehensive School Health Services Grant. And we're going to turn it over to Brian, and he's going to talk about, oh, let me skip one more slide in between. So first we're going to talk about the award. Brian will explain that. The purpose and the goals of the grant. We'll talk about the scope of service, and we'll talk about the outcomes. So now I'll turn it over to Brian.
This was highly competitive, so across the state, only 57 schools and/or districts were awarded funding through DPH. Annual award to Wilmington will be $75,000. This is based on enrollment size, proportion of students that are economically disadvantaged. The nice thing is this is a 5-year grant, but there's an option to renew it twice. So we have the potential of having this grant cycle last 9 years, which seems like an eternity. But that's a very positive piece of this, that we can continue that. So.
And so the goal of the Comprehensive School Health Services Grant is to build on existing infrastructure to provide all school-age children access to school health services that is managed by a qualified school nurse manager. The program will strengthen the capacity to provide case management and to support students with more significant health needs, continuous quality improvement through data collection and analysis, and programs that provide access to care to address health disparities and inequities. In order to support students' academic achievement, and the major component will be to reduce chronic absenteeism. There are 2 major areas of focus: the care coordination model and the bridge transition program, and Christine will talk about that very briefly soon. Evidence-based practice will be implemented using MTSS, or the multi-tiered system of supports, and Christine will also talk about that. So I'll turn it over to you, Christine.
So multi-tiered system of supports is an acronym that means exactly that, MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports, which is a framework that many schools use throughout Massachusetts to provide supports to students. And it can be, basically at the first level is all students. How are we providing programming, evidence-based, strong supports for students at the level? We've done a lot for academics, and we're really focusing more on the behavior side of that triangle now. So Tier 1 really is the whole class, what we're providing for supports. As we move on to Tier 2, it's more targeted, explicit instruction for students that might be struggling, anxiety, depression. They might need some supports from a school adjustment counselor more intensively. Tier 3 is that more intensive service. A few of our students are in that area that we provide, again, more intensive supports. And we're looking again at the social emotional piece of it, the behavior, and how we can really provide specific supports targeted at that level.
So you received 2 handouts in your packet. One was on data that was submitted with our grant application, and the second one is the scope of services for the Comprehensive School Health Services Grant. There are 9 components to that scope of service, and we're going to very briefly talk about each component for you. Program infrastructure has to do with nursing staffing. Adequate school nurse staffing needs to be in place to meet the demands of the health services that are needed for the student population. The Department of Public Health recommends that staffing be determined by workloads and not caseloads to be sure that the health needs of students are being met. Workload considers more than ratios and acuity. It takes into account the social determinants of health, which is a big trending topic right now, and the school health care needs when implementing appropriate nursing staff.
Comprehensive health education. WPS provides all students in grades 1 through 12 health education curriculum that demonstrates the importance of incorporating healthy habits into everyday life. Through differentiated instruction, students learn to make informed and responsible judgments regarding physical and mental health for oneself and for society. Pre-K and K health education was identified as an area to address, as well as the WPS rates of overweight and obesity. Therefore, our plan will be to implement health education in grades pre-K and K, and we'll look into purchasing nutrition education materials at the elementary level.
The case management model in the school setting addresses the needs of the students with chronic health conditions, including behavioral, oral, reproductive, and other health needs, so that all students may attend school safely. This model includes active engagement with partners, such as healthcare providers in the community, and strategies providing meaningful access to services in order that disparities and inequities are addressed. The outcome will be improvement in attendance and academic achievement.
And the 4th scope of service will be our community health assessment. And through our district's work with the School Wellness Advisory Council and our Wilmington Public Schools Behavioral Health Task Force, the plan will be to implement a community health assessment and look at the data related to our health screenings currently, counseling reports, homeless liaison reports, Department of Public Health reports, Department of Secondary and Elementary Education data through the early warning sign indicators, and other data related to all of the elements captured in the handout that you received tonight. For example, students on IEPs, students with special health care needs, our homeless student population, and again, our students with chronically absenteeism rates.
Part of the grant provides a sustained bridge program that we are excited to bringing into the tiered system of supports that I was talking about. This program really will help with Tier 2, Tier 3 at the high school level to provide services to students that are re-entering the school system from, it could be a long absenteeism due to a hospitalization, significant mental health trauma situation, and concussion is also another area that will support students for a temporary period of time to reacclimate them back into the academics, to gain some confidence coming back into the school after such a traumatic event. So we're really excited about that. We're at the beginning stages of that and looking forward to working with the team to bring that to Wilmington.
A big piece of this grant has to do with health disparities and inequities that exist due to race or socioeconomic status. So this grant will fund us in the endeavor to gather data and make decisions around whether it be professional development for staff or programming for kids, just to make sure that there are no health disparities and that there is no racial inequity that is impacting students' ability to learn and succeed in school.
And so management information systems, we're currently using Snap Health software with the nursing staff, and we obviously use Aspen across the district for the district-wide student information system. We'll be collecting data using both of these programs, and we'll be required to provide monthly activity reports and an end-of-the-year status report on results and measures. Continuous quality improvement is something that we've been doing for many years now. It's similar to what's called PDSA now, which is Plan, Do, Study, Act. where you look at collecting data, maybe on things like chronic absenteeism, and then look for other factors that are connected with these students. Come up with a plan, an action plan to address the concerns, implement that plan, and then look at the outcomes and look for positive outcomes.
And just to wrap up on the scope of services, it will be really important collaborating with schools, community partnerships, including Board of Health, Wilmington Police, just bring all this together and work together for community-based programming.
So then the Comprehensive School Health Services Grant, the outcomes we're anticipating outcomes to be in hopes of decreasing chronic absenteeism within the district, work at decreasing our childhood obesity and overweight children, increase our services to our English language learners, our students with mental and behavioral health conditions, and then obviously students that have been identified as homeless, as well as students who may in fact been bullied at school, and then increase all of our individual health care plans for our children in the district. And then the graphic that you see is also part of our School Wellness Advisory Council, which entails dealing with providing for our entire child, educating the whole school, whole community model. So we've actually been working with that model itself probably for 2+ years within our School Wellness Advisory Council. So, and it's also part of health education, physical education. It just all brings everything together with the child being at the center of it.
So we've provided you with a very brief overview of the new School Health Services Grant, and I would like to acknowledge and thank our grant writing committee, Christine Murray, Laura Stinson, Brian Regan, Tim Alberts, Janice Bacon, and Sue McDonald. It was truly a collaborative effort, would not have been possible without everybody coming together as a team. We're looking forward to implementing the new Comprehensive School Health Services Grant, and we do anticipate positive outcomes for our students. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Ragsdale?
So this is a $75,000 per year grant. What is that money primarily being spent on? Are we purchasing things? Are we giving stipends to staff? What are we using that money to, how are we using, I guess, to implement these various programs that you've outlined?
So infrastructure would be the number one thing to look at. We're looking at adding 2 staff members, a .4 social worker that will help to support the Bridge program, and a .4 care coordinator. And the care coordinator would help with coordinating care that's behavioral, mental health, and physical health. So that would be a major part of the grant funding. Program support would be another part. Professional development is another component. Health curriculum. Am I missing anything else?
No, I think that's it. I was trying to review it earlier. I think that sounds correct.
That's basically everything. And there are strict requirements for how the money can be allocated and guidelines that have been provided for us.
Any questions, comments, Mr. Sanders?
I just want to say this is great. This is exciting, especially for 9 years. Is especially taking a look at the chronic absenteeism. I mean, in the packet it says 23% chronic absenteeism. That sounds like super huge. So I'm glad that that's part of this, and that's what you guys are, one of the main things you're going to try to tackle. So that's great.
That's part of the year zero planning that we're getting involved in with the big program, and we'll be looking at anyone that has consistently 5 days in a row absenteeism, and then kind of targeting that group.
Is that the same chronic absenteeism as in the state accountability system? Is that the missing 10%, 18 or more days of school, or is there a different?
Yes, we would use the early warning indicator system.
But track it also earlier.
To track our students and come up with a cohort of students that are chronically absent, which would be, that would be defined as 10% or absent 3 times in a month.
Right, and then action plan.
Okay, thank you very much.
you.
Congratulations on this. Thank you. brings us to our last item under new business, the summer reading program, which is being presented by
I guess it's.
you.
I'll set it.
I'm gonna take my time.
Well, the final item this evening under new business, there is a brief document included in here. This is really meant to be informational and really hit upon two things. One, as we officially did, of course, enter summer recess today with the last day of school here in the district, one of the important things that certainly we know, and when I say we, I mean educators, is the critical importance of sustaining reading for our young people over the course of the summer. And so this is really an effort to try and just put some context around the importance of that. This is very brief, meant to be very informal, and speaks specifically to the elementary level, but I know that there's some information as it relates to, for our parents and our community, for secondary school students as well, too, so.
Well, first, I'd recommend people go to the website and go to important links and drop down. There is a summer reading link there. There is, on the bottom of that page, there is a hyperlink that will bring you to all the information you need for elementary and secondary, middle and secondary summer reading information. So I was going through it again today prior to this meeting, and it is very comprehensive. The documents that you open there actually have embedded hyperlinks that bring you to other documents, so it's pretty user-friendly. So I encourage parents to check that out at home. It's broken out by grade level, which makes it very easy. Just some of the things to think about for parents. The value of this, our program, is really to foster a love of reading. It's less about sort of extra points in school or in classes. It's about that love of reading, which the kids don't need to think about this, but as adults, we need to think about the fact that it helps with that summer slide if kids are continuing to read. At the elementary level, we really want to focus on families engaging with their children around reading, and it can be a nice way to make connections with your kids. You can share books, read books together. The Title I Literacy Night that they held at Woburn Street a few weeks back, that was really the focus of that. It was getting parents to sit with their kids. We had our librarian, Barbara Robb, come and talk about the summer reading program there, which is always fun for kids. I think they're doing a bead program this summer where you can make a bracelet depending on how many books you read. So the community really does some fun things to get students, young people engaged around reading. It's a little more difficult as they get older, and it feels a little more academic, I think, at the secondary level. But again, to try and combat that, Mia Parviainen, our CTL for ELA, 6 through 12, has worked with teachers to create a program that gives kids choice. So whatever grade level you look at, 6 through 12, there are choices for the most part that kids can try and find a book that interests them. Again, at that age, it's sort of maintaining an interest if there is one, or developing one if there isn't, because we all know that students that read regularly, the research all tells us that they tend to do much better in school than those that don't. So that's really the focus of the summer reading program. Again, is to foster reading, get kids to read. Again, at the high school level, it does become a little more course specific, but again, they are trying to provide that choice element so that kids have that ownership of it themselves. So again, go to the website, you'll find all of that information, and we hope you have a great summer of reading. That's very important. If there are any questions about the program specifically, I will do my best to answer them.
I just wanted to say, I thought it was right on the district's homepage, because I found it easily
Maybe,
this
I just might have
afternoon.
not
That's okay, because I'm always curious to find out what kind of books are out there that are inspiring, and there's some very interesting, and quite a selection, too. I remember back when we were promoting the summer reading piece, and students had like 2 books to choose from. Now there's like 6 to 8 books with topics that I can see would be of interest of the age bracket of which they're catering to. So I really liked it because it has a nice little summary about the story. I do like the hyperlinks with regards to what the book's about, and it's some new books that I'm not familiar with, obviously, but I have to say it's very well done, and it's right there on the homepage, so it's They're
That's good
easy, you don't have to go search.
I clearly missed it.
Well,
I went to
you know,
drop
you don't
down,
have to
but-
go searching for it, so which is, I think, a lot easier to.
Great.
Just I'll quickly, I can't stay away from this topic, so I'll quickly add just two things. One, the Kindles at the library do have all of the middle and high school books down them, so if you do go on vacation and you take it, all of the books are there, so your children can read not just one, but all of the summer reading books. I'd also remind, I think, families not to get too bogged down by the writing aspect of what goes with it, but really to encourage your children to love the books and enjoy the books, and I find that reading the book along with your child, even if it's a high school child, but reading the same book so you can have discussions about it certainly gets them more excited, and I think doing it early in the summer and then not having it hang over people's heads for too long, where you suddenly start to feel as though, oh my goodness, now we have to get it done. That this idea is really to have kids just go get ready to just start reading right away, and that they'll just continue that on their own throughout the summer. So I hope that you enjoy the selections are quite excellent at the secondary, middle and secondary level, as Mrs. Burns stated. They're all really available at the library, so if you head over there, I don't know, tomorrow or Friday, you can start checking things out. And the librarians are very helpful in helping children, if they do have liked a text, to find one that's similar, or if they don't like a text, maybe helping them find something they love a little bit more. And I will, along with my kids, try and read a lot of the text with them, just so I have a sense of what it is they're reading about. So try and have fun with it. I think that they really do work hard to make this as engaging as possible, to create truly lifelong readers. So, all right, and I'll stop. Sorry. Okay. I think, are there any other comments about summer reading from the committee? That is the last item under new business, and that brings us to public comment. There are many people here. Is there any public comment? So you can come up to the microphone, and then you'll state your name and address, please.
I'm Natalie Hayduck, and I live at 19 Amherst Road. I am the mother of one of the gymnasts here today. My daughter, Jessica Hayduck, finished her 10th grade today. I think Emerson did a fantastic job giving the student perspective, and I really can't state better from their point of view what they're really looking for in the program. I will tell you from a parent perspective, these are extremely dedicated athletes. Any of you know anything about gymnastics, they pretty much start living in the gym around 4 or 5 years old. And it's heartbreaking when they get to high school and they have to choose between the school they love and the town they love and representing them with their talent and the sport they love. And my daughter Jessica had to go through that. Sorry, I get very nervous talking. My daughter Jessica had to go through that in her 2 years here. It was heart-wrenching, and honestly, it still continues. At this time, she has chosen to represent her school at the expense of her sport. As a cheerleader here, she continues some involvement still with the gymnastics, but really she misses it terribly. And I think that the opportunity, scholarships, earning your varsity letter, all that stuff means a lot to these kids. And to take away the opportunity to really represent your school is just, as I said, it's just heartrending for them. I understand as a parent that there's practical aspects to this. You need the budget, you need the facilities. There have been many discussions over several years now about how would we be able to do that. I believe proposals have been brought to previous athletic directors. We have a gym in town that, Gym Street, that has brought forward a proposal in the past, willing to let us use their facility. There are experienced high school and private club coaches who have expressed their willingness to volunteer to coach their athletes in a competitive high school environment. You have clearly interested students. There were over a dozen students here over the course of the night. Some of them had to leave. Many of them have stayed for 2 hours on their last day of school and their first day of summer vacation. I think that speaks volumes to their dedication. And I think it's important to note that Wilmington is surrounded by several gyms, which means your talent bench is very deep. You go back to the middle school, you go back to the intermediate school, and even into the elementary and the Boutwell, and you will find gymnasts at every level. And many of them wind up leaving the sport because of a lack of a future in high school athletics for them here. So it's not a few students here tonight and how long is this going to last. We have a really strong gymnastics culture within the town. There's been discussion about the budget, and we understand that the budget has been set. But again, you also have, in addition to the students that were here, you see committed parents. And they have asked among ourselves, some of our spokespeople have spoken in different officials, asking about the opportunity to fundraise the gap until we can be part of the budget. We understand that there are the president, maybe not the president, but creative options that have come up with the swim team, and the parents being able to bridge that gap by working with a neighboring town. We would be willing to sit down with the board, with the school, to figure out how do we make this happen for our students. And I think a lot of these young ladies display leadership skills every day, and they would be willing to be student leaders in establishing that team. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment?
I'm the parent of an incoming freshman to Wilmington High School. Also training level 10 gymnast who represented Gym Street at the Eastern Gymnastics in Florida this year and did pretty well. But because she's so devoted to her sport, she will not be able to play a high school sport. The only sport she would be willing to play would be gymnastics, and there hasn't been an opportunity. I have brought it up a couple times and have been told that she could perhaps be a cheerleader, and that would be the only option for her. I think it is important to give these girls an opportunity. There's a lot of girls in this town that are very talented. I think we would be a force to be reckoned with a lot of the surrounding towns. I've seen a lot of her friends who have successfully completed at the club level and the high school level and seen them shine. It's given them an opportunity to represent their school and then also do well at their club level, and it's been really good for them. So it'd be too bad for a lot of these girls to not be able to have an opportunity to play a sport in high school level. That's it.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, seeing no further public comment, that moves us to number 11, which is other reports. Are there any subcommittee reports? No? Okay. I'm not going to mention it, so we'll talk about it at the next one. Okay. Correspondence.
Yes, I do have a letter. On the front of it, it states, "Life's path is more easily traveled in the company of friends like you. Thank you for your kindness, the family of Margaret, Peggy Kane." And it goes on to read, "Dear WSC, we can't thank you enough for the beautiful flowers for Mom's funeral. Mom loved her years as a member of the school committee, and she loved all the ways she truly believed you are all able to support the students and staff of Wilmington Public Schools. And along the way, she made special friendships. Thank you again for helping her keep her passion for education alive. Love, the Benoit Kane family, Stacy, Rob, Jared, Madison, Katie, and Maggie."
Thank you. It was a beautiful, beautiful funeral. So, anything else for correspondence?
No.
No. Future school committee meeting dates. We have the June 26, 2019 school committee retreat. I don't have anything else to say about that, other than I think we may be beginning at 6:30.
Yes.
Do you want to add anything?
6:30, we'll be here. We won't have that, well, it is a public meeting. It will, the intention is not to have it televised in the same way that we do some of our other regular meetings, but we will post the agenda, have the chance to talk with Ms. Bryce and Ms. Bjork about the agenda for that, and we will get that out to members of the committee very soon.
All right. So that's one final motion.
Move to adjourn.
A second? Well, that was a quick one. Mr. Fennelly? All in favor?
Aye.
And that, I think, is unanimous. Yes? Unanimous? Unanimous. We're all ready to go.